on behalf of the Lords of Trade and Plantations in London, wrote to the merchants of Barbados to inquire as to the unhappy state of the Negroes and other slaves in Barbados by their not being admitted to the Christian religion. The self-titled Gentleman of Barbados explained that the conversion of their slaves to Christianity would not only destroy their property, but endanger the island, inasmuch as converted Negroes grow more perverse and intractable than others. Anti-conversion sentiment was one of the defining features of Protestant slave societies in the 17th and early 18th centuries. While enslaved Africans in Spanish, French, and Portuguese colonial societies were regularly introduced to Catholicism and baptized, whether willingly or not, Protestant slave owners in the English, Dutch, and Danish colonies tended to view conversion as inconsistent or incompatible with slavery. Their anti-conversion sentiment was indicative of the changing meaning of Protestantism in the American colonies. Over the course of the 17th century, Protestant planters claimed Christian identity for themselves, creating an exclusive ideal of religion based on ethnicity, a construct that I call Protestant Supremacy. Protestant supremacy was the predecessor of white supremacy, an ideology that emerged after the codification of racial slavery. I refer to Protestant supremacy rather than Anglican or Christian supremacy because this ideology was present throughout the Protestant American colonies, from the Danish West Indies to Virginia and beyond. It was most likely to develop in places with an enslaved population that was larger than the free population, such as Barbados, Jamaica, or South Carolina. In these colonies, Anglican, Dutch Reformed, and Lutheran slave owners conceived of their Protestant identities as fundamental to their status as masters. They constructed a caste system based on Christian status, in which heathenish slaves were afforded no rights or privileges, while Catholics, Jews, and non-conforming Protestants were viewed with suspicion and distrust, but granted more protections. When Protestant missionaries arrived in the plantation colonies intending to convert enslaved Africans to Christianity in the 1670s, they encountered slave societies that had already developed churches founded on exclusion. Planters regularly attacked missionaries, both verbally and physically, and blamed the evangelizing newcomers for slave rebellions, regardless of evidence to the contrary. Missionaries responded to this hostile environment by articulating and promoting a vision of Christian slavery that reconciled Protestantism with bondage. Christian slavery was a polysemic concept. At the most basic level, it was an attempt to Christianize and reform slavery. Protestant theologians and missionaries drew on biblical descriptions of slavery, as well as the ideal of the godly household, to encourage slave owners to assume responsibility for the spiritual lives of their enslaved laborers. They also noted that Christian slavery had a long and well-established history in Europe and the Catholic American colonies. As missionaries faced opposition from slave owners, however, the meaning of Christian slavery shifted. Missionaries increasingly emphasized the beneficial aspects of slave conversion, arguing that Christian slaves would be more docile and harder working than their heathen counterparts. They also sought to pass legislation that confirmed the legality of owning enslaved Christians. Over time, they integrated race into their arguments for Christian slavery. Since the ideology of Protestant supremacy used religion to differentiate between slavery and freedom, missionaries suggested that race, rather than religion, was the defining feature of bondage. Protestant missions to enslaved people have traditionally been examined within the context of anti-slavery thought, and have often been evaluated.